The elevator lurched on the 42nd floor, and I watched my reflection fragment across the polished steel doors. 3 years of careful construction were about to pay off. 3 years since the man I'd loved looked at me across a hospital bed and chose cruelty over compassion. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Sign these. Detective Warren's voice crackled through my earpiece, his surveillance van parked 2 blocks away. We've got visual confirmation. Target entered the building 7 minutes ago. I adjusted the silk scarf covering the left side of my face, the side that still bore faint traces of what the fire had done. The side Damien Volker had called ugly, while I was still bandaged, still healing, still believing he would stand by me. The doors opened onto the executive floor of Cortex Innovations. My Cortex Innovations, though only 4 people in the world knew that truth. Ms. Reeves? The receptionist looked up, her smile professional but warm. Mr. Volker is waiting in conference room A. He seems excited. Of course he was excited. He thought he was here for the final interview for Chief Technology Officer, a position that would pay him $400,000 annually plus stock options. He thought his charm and his stolen ideas had finally landed him the role he'd always craved. He had no idea the company he'd been courting for 6 months was built on the very algorithms he'd dismissed as amateur coding when we were together. No idea that the revolutionary AI security system Cortex had just licensed to 3 Fortune 500 companies was based on my designs, the ones I'd shown him in our apartment, the ones he'd laughed at before the fire. Before everything changed. I walked past the glass-walled offices, past employees I'd hired through 3 layers of recruitment agencies, past the innovation lab where my real team worked on projects that would reshape cybersecurity. Through every window, I saw the future I'd built alone, brick by brick, code by code, investor pitch by investor pitch. "Shall I bring in coffee?" the receptionist asked, her hand hovering over the intercom. "Not yet, Monica. Let him wait another 5 minutes. Has the legal team arrived?" "In conference room B as requested. Ms. Park said to tell you everything's ready." Everything was ready. Jennifer Park, the attorney who'd helped me structure this company, who'd created the shell corporations and privacy shields that kept my identity buried, had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Not just the termination, but the lawsuit that would follow. The theft of intellectual property claim that would destroy Damien's career permanently. I checked my phone. A text from my brother, Daniel, the only family I had left. "Are you sure about this, Sophie? It's not too late to just move on." But it was too late. It had been too late the moment Damien walked out of that hospital room 3 years ago, the moment he looked at my burned face and said those words that would echo through every sleepless night since. "I can't do this. I can't look at that every day. You're not the woman I fell in love with anymore. I'm sorry, Sophie, but you're ugly now. I just can't." The bandages had still been fresh. The pain medication made everything feel distant and surreal. I'd thought maybe I'd heard wrong. Maybe the trauma was making me imagine things. But then he'd left. Actually left, while I was still hospitalized, and I'd realized that some words, once spoken, can never be unheard. The fire had been his fault, technically. His faulty wiring in the startup office he'd insisted on setting, up in our building's basement, cutting corners to save money on his latest failed venture. I'd gone down to bring him dinner and found the whole space engulfed. I'd tried to save his precious servers, his backup drives, pulling equipment from the flames like an idiot, because I'd loved him, because I'd thought we were a team. The smoke inhalation had nearly killed me. The burns had covered my left arm, my shoulder, and crept up the left side of my neck to my jaw and cheek. 3 surgeries, 6 months of recovery, and through it all, nothing from Damien. No calls, no texts, no visits. Just silence and that final word, ugly. "Ms. Reeves?" Monica's voice pulled me back. "It's been 5 minutes." I straightened my shoulders, adjusted my scarf one final time, and walked toward conference room A. Through the frosted glass, I could see Damien's silhouette. He was pacing, probably rehearsing his pitch, probably imagining his grand future at Cortex. My hand touched the door handle. 3 years of physical therapy, 3 years of building this company in secret, 3 years of strategic positioning and careful planning, all leading to this moment. I pushed open the door, preparing and narrating. This story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Damien turned, his smile already in place, professional and confident. He was wearing a navy suit, probably the expensive one he'd bought with his last signing bonus from DataCore Systems. His dark hair was styled perfectly, his jaw cleanly shaved. He looked exactly like the man I'd loved, the man I'd trusted with my ideas, my dreams, my future. Ms. Reeves. He extended his hand, his smile widening. I'm Damien Volker. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I've been following Cortex's work for months, and I have to say what you've built here is extraordinary. I didn't take his hand. I just looked at him, watching his face, waiting for recognition to dawn. It didn't. He had no idea who I was. The scarf covered most of the scarring, and the surgeries had been good, better than expected. My voice had changed slightly, deepened by the smoke damage to my throat. I'd lost weight during recovery and gained it back differently. My hair was shorter now, darker, styled in a way I never would have worn before. I'd even started wearing glasses, clear frames that changed the shape of my face. I'd become someone new, someone he couldn't recognize, someone with power. Mr. Volker, I said, my voice steady. Please, sit down. He sat, still smiling, still confident. I've prepared a presentation on how I can contribute to Cortex's growth. I know the CTO position is highly competitive, but I believe my experience at DataCore and my previous work on security protocols makes me uniquely qualified. His previous work, my work, the algorithms I'd developed, the code I'd written late at night while he slept, the innovations I'd shared with him because I'd thought we were partners. Tell me about your security protocol work, I said, settling into the chair across from him. I pulled out a tablet, opening a file. Specifically, the quantum encryption bypass you claimed to develop at DataCore. His eyes lit up. This was his moment, his chance to shine with my stolen ideas. Of course. The quantum encryption bypass was a revolutionary approach to penetration testing. Traditional methods rely on brute force or social engineering, but I developed a novel technique that exploits the measurement problem in quantum systems. I nodded, making notes, letting him continue. The key innovation was recognizing that quantum encrypted data isn't truly locked until observed. By creating a probabilistic shadow system that mirrors the quantum state without collapsing it, we can essentially test security vulnerabilities without triggering the encryption's defensive protocols. Every word was mine. Every concept, every technical detail pulled from the papers I'd written, the late-night conversations we'd had, the whiteboard sessions in our old apartment where I'd mapped out these ideas while he'd half listened, playing on his phone. Fascinating, I said. And you developed this entirely on your own? Well, I had a team at DataCore, but the core concept was mine. I actually started working on it years ago, before I even joined the company. It's been a passion project. A passion project. My passion. My project. Mr. Volker, do you know what the penalty is for intellectual property theft in the state of California? His smile faltered. Just slightly. Just for a second. I'm sorry? I pulled out another document, sliding it across the table. This is a patent filing from 3 years ago. The inventor is listed as Sophie Chen. The quantum encryption bypass technique is described in detail, the same technique you just claimed to have developed. The color began draining from his face. His eyes darted to the document, scanning it quickly. I watched him recognize the words, the diagrams, the technical specifications. I watched him realize he'd walked into a trap. I don't understand, he said, but his voice had lost its confidence. Sophie Chen? I knew someone by that name, but this is just a coincidence. Similar ideas developed independently. Sophie Chen, I repeated. Your girlfriend of 4 years. The woman who lived with you, worked with you, shared her research with you. The woman who was hospitalized 3 years ago after a fire in your basement office. The woman you abandoned while she was still in recovery. His face went white. Completely white. His hands gripped the edge of the table. The woman you called ugly. I reached up and slowly pulled the scarf away from my face. The scarring was still visible, though faded. A pattern of healed tissue running from my jaw up to my cheekbone, disappearing into my hairline. Not as bad as it had been, not as bad as he'd seen it in the hospital, but unmistakable. Sophie? The word came out as a whisper. But you look different? I finished. 3 years of healing will do that. 3 years of surgery and recovery and rebuilding. 3 years of becoming someone new. Someone who owns the company you thought would be your next big break. He stood up so fast his chair toppled backward. This is insane. You can't be serious. This company can't be yours. You were a freelance coder. You never had this kind of capital, this kind of connections. You're right, I said calmly. Sophie Chen, the freelance coder you knew, didn't have these things. But Sophie Chen, the woman who spent 6 months in a hospital bed with nothing to do but code and plan and design, had plenty of time to build something extraordinary. The same woman whose insurance payout from your faulty wiring funded the initial development. The same woman who licensed her quantum encryption patents to 3 different investors before the company even officially existed. That Sophie Chen had everything she needed. I stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the city. 42 floors up, the city sprawled beneath us. All those lights and lives and possibilities. You want to know the really funny part, Damien? I didn't build this company for revenge. Not at first. I built it because I needed something to survive for. Because when you walked out, when you looked at me and said I was ugly, something inside me died. And I had to rebuild it. I had to prove, at least to myself, that I was more than my face. More than what you saw. I turned back to him. He was still standing, frozen, his face a mask of shock and dawning horror. But then, about 6 months ago, I started seeing your name. You were using my work, claiming my ideas, building your career on my innovations, and I realized that letting you go, letting you walk away with no consequences, that wasn't strength. That was just letting you win. So I decided to bring you here, to show you exactly what you lost, to show you what ugly actually built. Sophie, he started, but I held up my hand. Ms. Reeves, I corrected. In this building, you call me Ms. Reeves, and you should know that the legal team in the next room has been documenting every word you've said, every claim you've made about developing my work independently. Every lie, the door opened. Jennifer Park walked in, followed by 2 other attorneys I'd retained specifically for this case. Behind them, Detective Warren entered, no longer just a voice in my earpiece but a physical presence in a rumpled suit, his badge visible on his belt. Mr. Volker? Jennifer said, her voice crisp and professional. You are being served with a cease and desist order regarding the use of proprietary technology developed by Ms. Sophie Reeves, formerly Chen. Additionally, we are filing a civil suit for intellectual property theft, fraud, and damages. The police are here because we have evidence that suggests potential criminal violations as well. Damien looked between all of us, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. This is crazy. You can't do this. Sophie, please, we can talk about this. I made a mistake, I know I did, but this is too far. Too far? I felt something cold settle in my chest. You stole 3 years of my work. You built your career on my ideas. You left me when I needed you most and called me ugly while I was covered in burns from saving your equipment. And you think holding you accountable is too far? I was scared, he said, and now there were tears in his eyes. Real tears, or a good approximation. The fire, the injuries, I panicked. I didn't know how to handle it. I was young and stupid and scared. You were 29, I said flatly. And you weren't too scared to steal my work. You weren't too scared to pitch it as your own. You were just too scared to look at my face. Detective Warren stepped forward. Mr. Volker, we need you to come down to the station to answer some questions about the intellectual property theft allegations. You're not under arrest at this time, but I strongly suggest you cooperate and bring an attorney. This is insane, Damien said again, but the fight was going out of his voice. He looked at me, really looked at me, and I could see him trying to find the woman he'd known, the woman he'd hurt. Sophie, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know I hurt you. I know I was terrible. But please don't destroy my life over this. I'm not destroying your life, I said quietly. I'm taking back what's mine. There's a difference. Jennifer handed him a folder thick with documents. This contains all the details of our suit, along with evidence we've compiled. I suggest you find legal representation immediately. The preliminary hearing is scheduled for next month. Damien took the folder with shaking hands. He looked at me one more time, his face a mixture of shock, fear, and something that might have been regret. I really am sorry, he whispered. For all of it. So am I said. And I meant it. I was sorry that this was necessary. Sorry that the man I'd loved had turned out to be someone who could abandon me at my lowest and steal from me at his highest. Sorry that 3 years of my life had been spent recovering from his choices, but I wasn't sorry for what I was doing now. Detective Warren escorted Damien out, followed by 2 of the attorneys. Jennifer stayed behind, closing the door gently. How are you feeling? She asked. I walked back to the window, pressing my palm against the cool glass. I don't know. I thought I'd feel triumphant, vindicated, but mostly I just feel tired. That's normal, Jennifer said, coming to stand beside me. Revenge isn't like the movies. It doesn't fix what was broken. It just balances the scales. Will the suit hold up? Absolutely. We have documentation of your work dating back 5 years. We have witnesses who can testify to your relationship with Volker and his access to your research. We have emails where he pitched your ideas at DataCore without attribution. It's airtight, I nodded slowly. Below us, I could see Damien emerging onto the street, Detective Warren beside him. Even from 42 floors up, I could see the slump in his shoulders, the defeat in his posture. What happens now? I asked. Now we let the legal process work. He'll probably try to settle once he realizes how much evidence we have. His career is effectively over either way. No tech company will touch him once this goes public. And the criminal charges, if they stick, could mean jail time. Jail time. For stealing my work. For building his success on my foundation. Jennifer, I said quietly, did I do the right thing? She was quiet for a moment, considering. I think you did the necessary thing. Sometimes that's the same as the right thing. Sometimes it's not. But you gave him every chance to acknowledge what he did, to make it right, and he chose to lie instead. He chose to keep stealing from you even when you were standing right in front of him. He called me ugly, I whispered, while I was still healing, while I was still covered in bandages from saving his equipment from his fire. That's the thing I can't get past. Not the theft, not the abandonment, but that word. Ugly. Like my worth was only ever about my face. And now you've shown him that your worth was never about your face, Jennifer said. You've shown him and yourself that you're so much more than what he could see. There was a knock at the door. Monica poked her head in. Ms. Reeves? The team meeting starts in 15 minutes. Should I have them wait? The team meeting. Because I still had a company to run. I still had employees depending on me. Projects in development, investors to update. Life didn't stop because I'd finally confronted my past. No, I said, straightening my shoulders. I'll be right there. Just give me 5 minutes. Monica nodded and closed the door. I turned back to Jennifer. Thank you, I said, for everything. For helping me build this. For protecting my identity. For making this possible. It was my pleasure, Jennifer said with a slight smile. Besides, you're paying me very well. That got a small laugh out of me. That I am. She headed for the door, then paused. Sophie, for what it's worth, you're not ugly. You never were. The scars just show that you survived. And survival is beautiful. After she left, I stood alone in the conference room, looking at my reflection in the window. The scars were still there, still visible, still a part of me. But Jennifer was right. They weren't ugly. They were proof that I'd survived. Proof that I'd rebuilt myself from the ashes, literally and figuratively. My phone buzzed. Another text from Daniel. How did it go? I typed back, it's done. He knows. The legal team has everything. His response came quickly. I'm proud of you, sis. Mom and Dad would be too. Mom and Dad. They'd died in a car accident 6 years ago, before any of this, before Damien, before the fire, before everything. Sometimes I wondered what they would think of who I'd become. Would they approve of the revenge? Would they understand? I like to think they would. They'd raised me to be strong, to stand up for myself, to never let anyone diminish me. And that's exactly what I'd done. I gathered my things, checked my appearance in the mirror behind the door, and headed to the conference room where my team was waiting. 23 of the brightest minds in cybersecurity, most of them young, diverse, hungry to change the world. I'd hired them carefully, looking for people with raw talent who'd been overlooked by the big tech companies. People who understood what it meant to be underestimated. Good afternoon, everyone, I said, taking my seat at the head of the table. I know we're running a few minutes late. We had an unexpected situation with a potential hire that required immediate attention. Everything okay? Asked Marcus Chen, my lead developer. No relation, just a coincidence of names, though the irony wasn't lost on me. Everything's fine, I assured him. Better than fine, actually. We've removed a potential security risk before it became a problem. Now, let's talk about the Johnson Industries contract. Marcus, I believe you have an update on the implementation timeline? As Marcus launched into his presentation, I felt myself settling into the rhythm of the work. This was what mattered. Not revenge, not past hurts, but building something real, something that would outlast all of us. My phone buzzed silently in my pocket. I ignored it, focusing on the discussion about encryption protocols and server architecture. But during a lull, I glanced at the screen. It was a message from an unknown number. Sophie, please. We need to talk. This doesn't have to go this way. I can explain everything. Just give me a chance. Damien. Of course. Already trying to manipulate the situation, to find an angle, to make himself the victim. I deleted the message without responding. I'd given him his chance. 3 years ago, in a hospital room, when I'd needed him most. He'd chosen his answer then. Now he had to live with the consequences. Ms. Reeves? It was Sarah Kim, my operations manager. Your thoughts on the timeline? I pulled my attention back to the meeting. I think we can compress it by 2 weeks if we allocate additional resources to the back-end integration. Let's bring in the contractors from the Singapore office. They have experience with similar architectures. The meeting continued for another hour, covering 3 major projects and 2 new client pitches. By the time everyone filed out, I felt drained but focused. This was my real life now. Not the revenge, not the past, but the present I was building. Jennifer caught up with me in the hallway. Volker's attorney just called. They want to discuss a settlement. Already? I was surprised. It had been less than 3 hours. They must have reviewed the evidence. His lawyer knows he doesn't have a case. They'll try to negotiate the terms, minimize the damage. What do you recommend? That depends on what you want. Do you want justice or do you want to be made whole? Because those might not be the same thing. I considered that as we walked back to my office. What did I want? Damien in jail? His career destroyed? Or just acknowledgement of what he'd done and fair compensation for what he'd stolen? Set up a meeting, I said finally. But make it clear this is the only chance for settlement. If we don't reach an agreement, we proceed with everything, criminal charges included. Understood. When? Tomorrow, afternoon. I want him to spend the night thinking about what he's facing. Jennifer nodded approvingly. I'll set it up. Back in my office, I finally allowed myself to sink into my chair and close my eyes. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind exhaustion and something else. Not quite satisfaction, but maybe the beginning of closure. My intercom buzzed. "Ms. Reeves? Your 4 p.m. with the investors is here, of course." The investors. The people who'd believed in Cortex when it was just me and a laptop and a dream of building something that mattered. "Send them in," I said. Straightening up, pushing the fatigue away, 3 men entered, led by Robert Zhang, the venture capitalist who'd been my first major backer. "Sophie," he said warmly, shaking my hand. "Good to see you. We've been reviewing the quarterly numbers. Very impressive growth. Thank you, Robert. Please, sit." As we settled into the discussion of expansion plans and revenue projections, I felt the other parts of my life fading into the background. This was who I was now. Not Damien's ex-girlfriend, not a victim, not even really a survivor anymore. Just Sophie Reeves, CEO of a company that was changing the way the world thought about digital security. "We're particularly interested in your plans for the healthcare sector," Robert was saying. "The potential market there is enormous. We've actually just brought on a new consultant who specializes in HIPAA compliance," I said, pulling up a presentation on the monitor. Her approach to patient data encryption could revolutionize how hospitals handle information security. The meeting lasted 2 hours, ending with Robert and his partners agreeing to another round of funding. $20 million to fuel our expansion into medical technology security. $20 million that would create jobs, protect patient information, maybe even save lives. After they left, I stood at my window again, watching the sun set over the city. Somewhere out there, Damien was probably in his attorney's office, going through the evidence, realizing the extent of what he was facing. Somewhere out there, my past was catching up with his present, but here, in this office, in this company I'd built from pain and determination, I was looking at the future. My phone rang. "Daniel." "Hey," I answered. "Hey yourself. How are you really doing?" I thought about lying, about saying I was fine, triumphant, victorious. But Daniel deserved the truth. I'm exhausted and confused. I thought confronting him would make everything clear, make everything better. But it just feels complicated. "That's because real life is complicated," Daniel said gently. "The movies make revenge look simple. Good guys win, bad guys lose, credits roll. But you're not in a movie, Sophie. You're in your actual life, and it's messy. When did you get so wise? I have a wise sister. It rubs off." That made me smile. "Thanks for checking in. Always. You want to grab dinner this weekend? I'll cook. You bring wine. We'll pretend we're normal people with normal problems." Deal. After we hung up, I gathered my things and prepared to head home. Home to the penthouse apartment I'd bought last year, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the bay. The one that was nothing like the cramped space I'd shared with Damien, nothing like the woman I used to be. As I walked through the office, I passed by the framed patents on the wall. 6 of them now, all in my name, all representing innovations that were changing the industry. The quantum encryption bypass was there, the one Damien had tried to claim as his own. But so were 5 others, developed entirely after the fire, proof that my creativity hadn't died in those flames. Monica was still at her desk, finishing up some paperwork. "Have a good evening, Ms. Reeves," she called out. "You too, Monica. Don't stay too late." In the elevator going down, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of the day. The confrontation, the reveal, the look on Damien's face when he realized who I was. The satisfaction of seeing him squirm, the hollow feeling that came after. Jennifer was right. Revenge wasn't like the movies. It didn't fix what was broken inside me. It didn't erase the word ugly or the pain of abandonment. It just balanced the scales, made sure that actions had consequences, made sure that my work was acknowledged as mine. Was that enough? I wasn't sure yet. Maybe I'd never be sure. The elevator doors opened onto the parking garage. My car, a sleek electric sedan, waited in its reserved spot. As I approached it, my phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. Sophie, I'm begging you. I'll admit everything publicly. I'll give you credit for all of it. Just please don't press criminal charges. Please. I can't go to jail. I can't lose everything. I stared at the message for a long moment. This was the power I'd wanted, wasn't it? The power to make him feel what I'd felt. To take everything from him the way he'd tried to take everything from me. But looking at his desperate words, I didn't feel powerful. I just felt tired. I started the car and began the drive home, leaving the message unanswered. Tomorrow there would be the settlement meeting. Tomorrow there would be decisions to make about how far to push this, how much justice was enough. Tonight, I just needed to remember who I was. Not the woman Damien had called ugly. Not the burn victim fighting to survive. Not even the CEO with something to prove. Just Sophie. Scarred but whole. Broken but rebuilt. Alone but not lonely. The drive took me along the waterfront, past the spot where Damien and I used to walk on Sunday mornings, back when I thought we had a future together. Back when I thought love meant never having to face your worst moment alone, I'd learned differently. I'd learned that the only person you could truly count on was yourself. That strength came from survival, not from avoiding pain. That sometimes the only way forward was to stop looking back. But I'd also learned that revenge, while satisfying in concept, was complicated in execution. That making someone else suffer didn't automatically heal your own wounds. That justice and peace weren't always the same thing. My phone rang again. Jennifer this time. Sorry to bother you after hours, she said. But Volker's attorney just sent over their initial settlement proposal. I thought you'd want to see it tonight. Send it over, I said. I'll review it when I get home. Sophie? For what it's worth, you can still walk away from all this. You've made your point. You've shown him who you are. The rest is just details. Is that your professional advice? No, that's your friend talking. Professionally, I think we should crush him. Personally, I think you need to decide what will actually help you move forward. I thanked her and hung up, thinking about her words as I pulled into my building's parking garage. What would help me move forward? Total victory? Mercy? Something in between? I didn't have the answer yet. But I had tonight to think about it, and tomorrow to decide. And unlike 3 years ago, unlike that moment in the hospital when Damien walked away, I had the power to choose my own path forward. That, more than any revenge, was what I'd really won. Not power over him, but power over my own life. Not justice served, but control reclaimed. As I rode the elevator up to my penthouse, I caught my reflection in the mirrored walls. The scars were visible, the changes permanent. But the woman looking back at me wasn't ugly. She was a survivor. She was a creator. She was someone who'd turned pain into purpose and loss into legacy. She was me. And that was enough. The elevator doors opened onto my foyer. Home. My sanctuary. My space. Tomorrow would bring the settlement meeting. More decisions, more complications. But tonight, I could rest. I poured myself a glass of wine, walked out onto my balcony, and looked out at the city lights spreading below me like fallen stars. Somewhere in those lights, Damien was probably panicking, strategizing, trying to figure out how to escape the consequences of his choices. But that was his problem now, not mine. I'd done what I set out to do. I'd confronted him, revealed the truth, set the wheels of justice in motion. The rest would unfold as it would. And me? I had a company to run, innovations to develop, a life to live. A life that was mine, built by me, defined by me. Not by the man who'd abandoned me, not by the scars I carried, but by the choices I made going forward. I raised my glass to the city, to the future, to the woman I'd become. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, I could finally rest, knowing that I'd taken back what was mine. Not just my work, not just my dignity, but my power to shape my own story. And that was worth more than any revenge. The settlement meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. I arrived at 11. Jennifer found me in my office, reviewing the patent documents for what must have been the 100th time. "You're here early," she observed, setting down a coffee cup on my desk. Couldn't sleep, I admitted. Kept thinking about what he said yesterday. I can't lose everything. As if he didn't try to take everything from me. And yet you're reconsidering. It wasn't a question. I set down the papers and looked at her directly. Am I being weak? Letting him off easy? You're being human, Jennifer said, settling into the chair across from me. There's a difference between justice and vengeance, Sophie. You need to decide which one you actually want. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Monica's voice came through the intercom. Ms. Reeves? There's a woman here to see you. She says it's urgent. A Ms. Rachel Volker. Jennifer and I exchanged glances. Volker, I said. As in, his wife, Jennifer finished. Or ex-wife. They divorced 2 years ago. It's in the background check we ran. I hadn't known Damien had gotten married. Somehow that stung more than I expected. Send her in, I said. The woman who entered was petite, with dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail and tired eyes that had seen too much. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, no makeup, and she looked like she hadn't slept any better than I had. Ms. Reeves, she said, her voice steady despite the obvious tension. Thank you for seeing me. I'm Rachel Volker. Well, Rachel Morrison now. I took my maiden name back. Please sit, I gestured to the chair beside Jennifer. This is Jennifer Park, my attorney. Rachel sat, clutching a folder in her hands. I know I shouldn't be here. Damien doesn't know I'm coming. His lawyer would probably have a heart attack. But I saw the news this morning about the lawsuit and I had to come. The news? I looked at Jennifer sharply. It leaked, Jennifer said grimly. Someone at the police station, probably. Tech blogs are already running the story. Former DataCore senior engineer accused of IP theft. It's going viral, Rachel nodded. That's how I found out. And when I saw your name, saw what he was accused of stealing from you, I knew I had to tell you something. She opened her folder, pulling out printed emails. Damien didn't just steal from you, Ms. Reeves. He stole from me too. I took the papers she offered. They were email chains, dating back 5 years, between Rachel and Damien. In them, Rachel discussed her own work on machine learning algorithms, her research at MIT, her ideas for applying neural networks to security protocols. I met Damien at a tech conference, Rachel explained, her voice quiet. I was presenting my thesis work. He was charming, interested in my research, supportive. We got married 6 months later. I thought I'd found a partner who understood my passion for technology. But he used your work, I said, scanning the emails. The technical details were sophisticated, groundbreaking even. And I recognized some of them. They'd shown up in Damien's pitches at DataCore, mixed in with the ideas he'd stolen from me. He used everything, Rachel said bitterly. My research, my contacts, my reputation. He'd pitch my ideas as his own, then come home and tell me they weren't quite ready for publication. That we needed to refine them more. I believed him because I loved him, and because he was very, very good at making me doubt myself. Jennifer was already taking notes, her legal mind processing the implications. Ms. Morrison, would you be willing to testify to this? To provide evidence of his pattern of theft? That's why I'm here, Rachel said. When I saw what he did to you, Ms. Reeves, when I read about you being in the hospital, about him calling you. She stopped, her voice cracking. He did the same thing to me. Not physically, but mentally. He made me feel worthless. Made me feel like my ideas were only valuable when he presented them. When I finally left him, I'd convinced myself I wasn't smart enough for tech. I'm working retail now. Retail, when I have a PhD from MIT. The anger that had been simmering in my chest since yesterday suddenly crystallized into something sharper, clearer. This wasn't just about what Damien had done to me. It was about a pattern. A predator who found talented women, used them, and discarded them when he'd taken everything he could. Rachel, I said carefully, if you testify, this will get messy. His lawyers will come after you. They'll try to discredit you, make it seem like you're just a bitter ex-wife. Let them try, Rachel said, and there was steel in her voice now. I've spent 2 years thinking I was the problem, that I wasn't good enough, wasn't smart enough. Wasn't enough, period. But seeing your case, seeing that he did the exact same thing to someone else, I realized the problem was never me. It was him. Jennifer leaned forward. Ms. Morrison, I need to ask you something directly. Why now? Why didn't you come forward before when you divorced him? Rachel's laugh was hollow. Because I was ashamed. Because I'd let him convince me that my work wasn't really mine, that I'd just contributed to our projects. Because his lawyer at the divorce made it clear that if I said anything about intellectual property, they'd bury me in legal fees I couldn't afford. So I took the settlement, signed the NDA, and walked away. You signed an NDA? Jennifer's pen stopped moving. About the divorce settlement, yes. But not about my work. Not about what he stole. The NDA covered personal matters, financial arrangements. They never thought to make me sign away my right to talk about professional theft, because they didn't think I'd realized it was theft. Rachel smiled grimly. Damien always did underestimate me. I stood up and walked to the window, processing this new information. Behind me, I could hear Jennifer and Rachel discussing details, timelines, evidence. But my mind was racing ahead, seeing the bigger picture. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about stopping someone who would keep doing this. Keep finding talented women to exploit, keep stealing and manipulating and destroying careers. If Rachel and I had both fallen for it, how many others had there been? How many more would there be if we didn't stop him? Jennifer, I said, turning back to face them. Change of plans. We're not settling. Sophie, Jennifer started, but I held up my hand. I want to add Rachel's testimony to our case. I want to demonstrate a pattern of behavior. And I want to make sure that when this is over, Damien Volker never gets the chance to do this to anyone else. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for believing me. Thank you for coming forward, I said. That took courage. Jennifer checked her watch. The settlement meeting is in 3 hours. If we're adding Rachel's testimony, we need to brief her, prepare the documentation, and revise our strategy. We also need to notify Damien's attorneys that there's been a material change in the case. Do it, I said. All of it. The next 3 hours were a blur of preparation. Rachel went through her evidence with Jennifer's team while I reviewed the revised legal strategy. By the time 2 o'clock rolled around, we had built something that went beyond my personal revenge. We'd built a case that could actually change how tech companies handled IP theft, how they protected vulnerable employees, how they dealt with predators in their ranks. Damien arrived with his lawyer, a sharp-dressed man named Theodore Brennan, who looked like he charged $1,000 an hour. They both looked confident, probably expecting us to accept a reasonable settlement and move on. After all, corporations usually preferred quiet resolutions to public trials. They weren't expecting Rachel to be sitting at the conference table beside me. Damien's face went white when he saw her. Rachel, why are you here? Mr. Volker, Theodore said sharply, touching his client's arm in warning. Don't say anything, but it was too late. The shock on Damien's face had already confirmed everything we needed it to confirm. Jennifer opened her laptop, projecting a presentation onto the screen. Gentlemen, thank you for coming. As you can see, we've had a development in the case. Ms. Rachel Morrison, Mr. Volker's ex-wife, has provided evidence of a pattern of intellectual property theft that extends beyond Ms. Reeves's patents. This is highly irregular, Theodore protested. We came here in good faith to discuss settlement terms for the original complaint. You can't just ambush us with new witnesses and new claims. We're not ambushing anyone, Jennifer said calmly. We're simply providing you with a more complete picture of your client's behavior. Ms. Morrison is not currently a plaintiff in this suit, though we're discussing that possibility. She's here as a witness to Mr. Volker's established pattern of behavior. Theodore turned to Damien, who was still staring at Rachel. Did you steal work from your ex-wife? Damien's mouth opened and closed. We worked together. It was collaborative. She's just bitter about the divorce. I signed an NDA about the divorce, Rachel said, her voice steady now. But I never signed one about my work. And I have emails, Mr. Brennan, where your client explicitly took my research and presented it as his own. I have witnesses from MIT who can testify that the machine learning algorithms he claimed to develop at DataCore were actually derived from my thesis work. Theodore's confident expression was cracking. He pulled Damien aside, and they had a heated, whispered conversation in the corner. I watched Damien's body language shift from defensive to desperate, his hands gesturing frantically as he tried to explain, to justify, to spin. Jennifer leaned close to me. "They're going to fold," she whispered. "Brennan knows a losing case when he sees one." She was right. When they returned to the table, Theodore's entire demeanor had changed. "What are your terms?" he asked flatly. "Full public acknowledgement of the theft," Jennifer said, pulling up a document. "A written apology to both Ms. Reeves and Ms. Morrison. Complete restitution of all financial gains Mr. Volker made from the stolen work, which our accountants estimate at approximately $1.2 million over 3 years. And Mr. Volker will voluntarily surrender any patents or copyrights filed using the stolen material." "That's everything," Theodore protested. "That's his entire career." "That's the point," I said, speaking for the first time since they'd arrived. I looked directly at Damien. "You told me I was ugly. You walked away when I needed you most because you couldn't stand to look at my scars. But the ugliest thing in that hospital room wasn't my face, Damien. It was your character." Damien flinched like I'd struck him. "You didn't just steal my work," I continued. "You stole Rachel's. You've built your entire professional life on the backs of women you claimed to love. Women you manipulated and exploited and discarded. And you thought you'd get away with it because we were too hurt, too ashamed, too beaten down to fight back." "Sophie, I'm sorry," Damien said, and his voice broke. "I'm so sorry. I was wrong about everything. You were never ugly. You were brilliant and strong, and I was terrified because I knew I could never measure up to you. So I took your work and pretended it was mine, because that was the only way I could feel like I was worth something." "You could have just been yourself," Rachel said softly. "You could have been our partner, our supporter. You could have built your own reputation by helping lift us up. But instead you chose to tear us down to build yourself up. That's the real ugliness here." Theodore cleared his throat. "My client is willing to agree to the financial restitution and the surrender of patents. But the public apology and acknowledgement that will destroy his career permanently. Surely we can find some middle ground." "No," I said simply. "No middle ground. Because if we let him walk away quietly, he'll just find another talented woman to exploit. Another Rachel, another Sophie. We're not doing this just for us. We're doing this to protect whoever would be next." Damien put his head in his hands. "I'll be unhireable. No tech company will ever touch me." "Good," Jennifer said. "Maybe you'll finally have to succeed on your own merit. Or maybe you'll fail. But either way, you'll stop hurting other people to get ahead." The silence stretched out. Finally, Theodore leaned over and whispered something to Damien. Damien nodded once, defeated. "We accept your terms," Theodore said. "We'll draft the public statement today." "Already done," Jennifer said, sliding a document across the table. "We just need his signature." I watched Damien read through the statement, watched his hands shake as he held the pen. The statement was comprehensive. It detailed the theft from both Rachel and me, acknowledged his pattern of behavior, and included a formal apology. It would be released to every major tech publication, posted on his LinkedIn, sent to every company he'd ever worked for. It would end him professionally. Completely and permanently. "There's one more thing," I said as Damien lifted the pen to sign. Everyone looked at me. "I want you to start a fund. An anonymous scholarship fund for women in tech who've been victims of professional exploitation or harassment. $5,000 a year for the next 10 years. I'll match it from Cortex. We'll call it the Morrison Reeves Tech Opportunity Fund." Rachel's eyes widened. "Sophie, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do," I said. "Because this isn't just about punishing him. It's about helping the people he hurt and preventing others from being hurt. It's about taking something ugly and making something good from it." Damien looked up at me, tears streaming down his face now. "I really am sorry," he whispered. "For all of it. I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know I understand now. I understand what I destroyed." "Then sign," I said. And spend the rest of your life trying to be better, he signed. 3 copies, one for our attorneys, one for his, one for the court records. When he was done, he pushed the papers back across the table and stood up without another word. Theodore gathered their things, nodded curtly to Jennifer, and they left. The door closed behind them with a soft click. In the silence that followed, Rachel started crying. Not sad tears, but something else. Relief, maybe? Or release. It's over, she said. It's really over. It's over, I confirmed. I felt strange. Not triumphant, not vindicated, just tired. And somehow lighter. Like I'd been carrying something heavy for 3 years, and only just now set it down. Jennifer was already on her phone, coordinating with her team. I'll have the statement released within the hour, she said. I'll also start the paperwork for the scholarship fund. Sophie, are you sure about matching his contribution? That's $100,000 over 10 years. I'm sure, I said. Cortex can afford it. And it's worth it. Rachel wiped her eyes. I don't know how to thank you. Both of you. I came here this morning thinking I was just going to tell my story and maybe help your case. I never expected... You gave me something too, I said. You showed me that this wasn't just about me. That revenge for revenge's sake is empty. But fighting to protect others? That means something. We spent another hour at the office, handling the logistics, ensuring everything was properly documented. By the time Rachel left, promising to stay in touch and keep us updated on her life, the sun was starting to set. Jennifer and I stood at my office window, watching the city lights begin to twinkle in the gathering dusk. You did good today, Jennifer said. Not just legally, though that was impressive, but morally. You could have destroyed him just to destroy him. Instead, you made sure something positive came from all this pain. I had a good teacher, I said, bumping her shoulder gently. Thank you, Jennifer. For everything. For believing in me when I was just a burned woman with a laptop and a dream. For helping me build all this. It was my pleasure, she said. Besides, you paid me obscenely well. We both laughed at that, the tension of the day finally breaking. My phone buzzed. Daniel. I saw the news. The statement went out. How are you holding up? Better than expected, I typed back. Tell you about it over dinner. Your place this weekend? Absolutely. Proud of you, sis. After Jennifer left, I sat alone in my office for a while, thinking about everything that had happened. 2 days ago, I'd walked into that conference room ready for pure revenge, ready to make Damien pay for every cruel word, every stolen idea, every moment of pain. But something had shifted. Meeting Rachel, seeing that I wasn't alone in this, understanding that we could actually change something beyond just our own hurt, that had transformed everything. I pulled out my phone and opened my photos, scrolling back to the oldest ones. There was a picture of me from before the fire, young, happy, unscarred, standing next to Damien at some tech conference, both of us smiling. I looked at that young woman and felt a strange mix of emotions. Sadness for what she'd go through, pride for how she'd survive it, gratitude for the strength she'd discover in her darkest moment. Then I opened my recent photos. Me at the Cortex ribbon-cutting ceremony. Me with my team at the patent celebration. Me standing in front of a crowd at a tech conference, giving a keynote about cybersecurity innovation. Scars visible, head held high, confident and strong. These were the images that mattered. Not the before, not the trauma, but the after. The rebuilding. The becoming. I walked out of my office, through the empty corridors of Cortex, trailing my fingers along the walls. This place was mine. Built by my hands, my mind, my determination. Damien had tried to take credit for my work, but he could never take credit for this. This was irrefutably, undeniably mine. At the elevator, I caught my reflection in the polished doors. The scars were visible, the changes permanent. But I didn't see ugliness anymore. I saw survival. I saw strength. I saw a woman who'd been broken and rebuilt herself into something unbreakable. The elevator descended, and I thought about tomorrow. The news would spread. People would talk. Some would call me vindictive. Others would call me brave. I'd be labeled as many things: victim, survivor, CEO, whistleblower. But the only label that mattered was the one I gave myself. And I chose builder. Of companies, of futures, of second chances. Not just for myself, but for others like Rachel. Like all the women who'd been exploited and silenced and told their worth was determined by someone else's judgment. My car was waiting in the garage. As I drove home, I took a different route than usual, deliberately avoiding the waterfront path where Damien and I used to walk. I didn't need to avoid the memories anymore, but I didn't need to seek them out either. They were just part of my history now, not my present, and certainly not my future. At home, I poured a glass of wine and stepped out onto my balcony. The city spread below me, infinite and full of possibility. Somewhere out there, Rachel was probably feeling the same mix of emotions I was: relief, exhaustion, hope. And somewhere out there, Damien was facing the consequences of his choices. I didn't take pleasure in his downfall, not anymore. I just felt grateful that no one else would have to go through what Rachel and I had gone through. That was worth more than any personal satisfaction. My phone buzzed one last time. An email notification. The scholarship fund was already set up, and we'd received our first application. A young woman named Maya who'd been driven out of her startup by a co-founder who'd stolen her code and claimed it as his own. I sat down and read her story, my heart aching with recognition. Then I wrote back personally, telling her about the fund, about resources that could help her, about how talent and determination could overcome betrayal. And I told her something else, something I'd learned through all of this. Your worth isn't determined by those who tried to diminish you. It's determined by what you build after they're gone, and judging by your application, you're going to build something extraordinary. As I hit send, I realized this was the real victory. Not the lawsuit, not the public apology, not even the satisfaction of watching Damien's career crumble. The real victory was using my pain to prevent someone else's, turning suffering into strength, not just for myself, but for others. I raised my glass to the city, to Rachel, to Maya, and all the others like us, to everyone who'd been called ugly or worthless or not good enough by someone who was threatened by their brilliance. Here's to rebuilding, I whispered to the night. Here's to becoming. Here's to proving that the only opinion that matters is our own. The wind picked up, cool and refreshing, carrying away the last vestiges of anger and hurt. I breathed it in, feeling truly free for the first time in 3 years. Tomorrow, Cortex would continue growing. The scholarship fund would help talented women reclaim their careers. Rachel would start rebuilding her life, her confidence, her future. And I would keep doing what I did best, creating, innovating, building something that mattered. But tonight, I could finally rest. Not as a victim, not as a survivor, but simply as Sophie Reeves, scarred but whole, hurt but healed, once broken, now unbreakable. The past had tried to define me with one cruel word, but I'd redefined myself with actions, achievements, and compassion. I'd taken the worst moment of my life and transformed it into a purpose larger than revenge. And that, I realized as I watched the stars begin to appear above the city lights, was the truest form of victory. Not destroying the person who hurt you, but becoming someone so complete, so whole, so purposeful that their opinion becomes irrelevant. Damien had called me ugly, but I'd built something beautiful. And in the end, that was the only truth that mattered. I finished my wine, took one last look at the city I'd conquered not with vengeance but with vision, and went inside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new chances to help others and build something lasting. But tonight, I could finally sleep peacefully, knowing that I'd done more than get revenge. I'd gotten free, and that was worth more than anything else in the world. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.